Hello and welcome back to the Caption Life Show. In today's episode, we're going to review the latest film from Marvel and Sony Pictures Animation, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I am joined with fellow podcaster Ellie Khanverdi, who is the host of the All Day with Ellie show. Today's spotlight is going to be Comic Logic from Ashburn, Virginia. They're Northern Virginia's most exciting comic book store. They carry a full inventory of single issues, trade paperbacks, and custom artwork. Let's get started with the episode. Hi, and welcome to The Caption Life, a show for the most casual and dedicated fans of comics and a member of the Comic Watch family. I'm your host, Sean. Join me and discover what the world of comics and graphic novels have to offer. From one-on-one interviews with industry professionals, roundtable discussions with passionate fans, and reviews on the latest comics, TV shows, and movies. Now let's dive right on in. Hi everyone, and welcome back to The Caption Life. In last week's episode, we talked about the first full appearances in the comics of Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, and Spider-Man 2099, which I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes below. And we covered that because we were anticipating the exciting film of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And so today's episode, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to do a review of that film. And here is a quick recap of the movie in case you're not familiar with it or you just want to learn a little bit more about what the official synopsis is from Sony Pictures Animation. And it says, after reuniting with Gwen Stacy, Brooklyn's full-time friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is catapulted across the multiverse, where he encounters the Spider Society, a team of spider people charged with protecting the multiverse's very existence. But when the heroes clash on how to handle a new threat, Miles finds himself pitted against the other spiders and must set out on his own to save those he loves the most. Anyone can wear the mask. It's how you wear it that makes you a hero. It is produced by Sony Pictures Animations, is directed by Joaquim Dos Santos, which I hope I pronounced that correctly, Kent Powers, and Justin K. Thompson. It is written by Phil Lord, Christopher Miller, and Dave Callahan. And the cast consists of Shamik Moore, which I hope I pronounced that correctly. I just realized that I don't think I've ever heard it pronounced out loud, so I apologize if that is incorrect. But Shamik Moore, Haley Steinfeld, Oscar Isaac, Jake Johnson, Issa Rae, Brian Tyree Henry, and Luna Lauren Velez. But before we get started with our review, we do have an awesome guest with us. I'll be adding their thoughts and insights about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And joining us today is content creator and host of the All Day with Ellie podcast, Ellie Khanverdi. Ellie, welcome to the show again. This is your second time joining us on the show again, right? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, the first time you were on the show was we did a review of the Eternals that came out.
Yes, that's right.
2-3 years ago, something like that. And so I'm glad to have you back on the show finally again, because I really enjoy talking with you about all the movies. I know I've been on your show a couple of times to talk about movies, especially Mighty Ducks, and I absolutely love having discussion about films with you. So I'm excited to have you on the show to talk about this movie because wow, right?
Oh, I know. It's like, what else can you say? Just wow.
I know.
All capitals, like underline, bold print.
And that's what a lot of people have been saying about this film, and we'll get to that in a second. Before we dive into our review, I always like to talk to our guests a little bit about kind of who they are outside of this geeky fandom of comics and things like that. And so I just want to have a chit chat with you about your podcast. You're a podcaster yourself. It's not like your full-time job or anything like that, but you're do a podcast about it initially started as a podcast about Marvel films, even though that's not what you intended on. Yeah. And you still kind of do a lot of those, but your podcast is just about films in general and just kind of doing a review of them. And they range from like anything that came out recently to things that came out like back in the 90s and things like that. Right.
Yeah. I've gone through a whole journey with this podcast because it was funny. I initially had done it to discuss all the movies I love. But then it definitely accidentally became a Marvel podcast, which was hilarious to me because I was like, this was not my intention.
Right.
I don't mind it. I'm like, I'm not mad about it. But definitely, I was like, I don't want to be known just for doing Marvel.
Right.
But then I went through just like this weird transition, like last year with like the changing of the name. I was like, okay, I want it to reflect like the things I do on TikTok. And across social media what I talk about. And it was funny because I think it was like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, I was thinking about the podcast and I was like, okay, if I was like trying to explain to someone what it was, or like a one-liner of what the point of the show is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I figured it out. And I think I'm settling for it's like just like a celebration of geek culture and like the love for geek culture. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I settled for that. I'm like, I think that is the point of the show and what I want it to reflect. And whenever I
Yeah.
bring guests on to discuss different topics. So it's like a whole journey. It's like a little roller coaster ride of getting to where I am with it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. This show is primarily focused on comic books. With your show, what is your favorite episode that you've done that's not a comic book movie, that really gets you excited about that you did that episode on
That's
your
so
show?
funny because that's such a small handful of
Yeah.
episodes that like actually aren't related to Marvel or DC or anything.
Uh-huh.
But ooh, I don't know. That's so tough. I mean,
Now, I'll say, you could include Star Wars in there because Star Wars didn't start off as a comic book, right? Like there
it
are
is
Star Wars
true.
comics, but then to start off as a comic book. So I would say, Star Wars can be in that category of non-comic book movies for
I don't
that
think I've done
reason.
my Star Wars episode yet.
Well,
I'm
my
like,
bad.
now that you bring that up, I'm like, I don't think I put that episode out yet. It's in the works still.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like I did really enjoy doing the Mighty Ducks episode, I'd say, because you're like, yes.
Yes.
Because I mean, that was such a big movie for me when I was a kid. And then
Mhm.
I have to say, I also really liked my Knives Out episode that I did with
Oh,
Peyton, because
yeah.
again, that's another movie that I just absolutely love.
Hmm.
And like Peyton loves it too. So it was like, again, I mean, it's great to talk about these topics with people who also love them. So I
Hmm.
feel like outside of the Marvel and DC or comic related subjects, I think those two are like the big ones for me.
Right. That's awesome. Well, I love that you said Mighty Ducks. Knives Out is a great one. Both for as a movie, but also for your episode as well too. It's definitely one of those that a lot of people got excited about and really enjoyed because it's another kind of a mystery movie that was just really well done on a
Hmm.
whole, on a bunch of different levels. And so I can imagine why that was probably your favorite one. And I absolutely love that movie as well too. So
There's a
uh,
lot that you can discuss with that movie.
yeah, like there's a lot of layers to it. Not just like a who done it movie necessarily, but there's just a lot of themes that you can kind of go into. A lot of relationship dynamics and power dynamics that you can kind of explore. I forget his name, but Daniel Craig's character. Just the kind of levels of storytelling that he brings into the picture with not just being a detective but just how he is moving the story along
Mm.
in a lot of different ways as well too. So yeah, you're exactly right. There's a lot of things that you can kind of go about and discuss the different kind of parallels and the themes that kind of goes into the movie on a whole range. So but yeah, so definitely check out Ellie's podcast. Again, it's called All Day with Ellie. I'll put a link to her show in the show notes below as well. So let's talk about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. For those of you who have not seen the movie yet, just want to let you know there will be spoilers in this episode. We will be talking about what happened in the movie. So if you don't want the movie to be spoiled for you, then definitely hit pause right now, then come back to this later after you watch the movie. But this is your warning. So now that hopefully you pause and you've watched the movie, you come back to this spot. Let's dive into an overview or overall thoughts about this movie. Ellie, what did you think about this movie overall in terms of just anything about it? What did you walk away after, or what did you think after you walked away from this movie?
I loved it. I like walked out of there and I was like, that was phenomenal. That
Hmm.
was incredible. I had heard all the early reviews from a lot of people that I follow who got, the opportunity for either a early screening or who got to go to the premiere, and nothing but positive reviews from them. They were all saying like, "Oh, movie of the year, the best Spider-Man movie, better than Into the Spider-Verse." And I was like, "Okay, I believe it, but also is this just like the initial excitement and hype
Hmm.
walking out of there?" Or I'm like, "How much truth is in this review?" And then I walked out of there myself and I was like, "Oh my god, they were so right."
Right.
They were absolutely right. I adored it. I adored it. I thought it was amazing, and it got me so excited because we were talking about it before, that so much happens and you get so many amazing little details
Hmm.
that you need to watch it a couple times to really process and bring it all in.
Right. Yeah. To be completely honest with my experience and think about it in terms of what I was thinking about when I was watching the movie is at the very beginning, I thought it was really slow.
Mhm,
Because it pretty much begins with Gwen's kind of origin story and kind of getting you caught up to like what's been happening since the events that happened into the Spider-Verse. And I just remember thinking like it was kind of a slow pace.
mhm,
Um, but by the end of the movie, it made a lot of sense why they told that at the beginning of the movie, why it kind of took that pace. And at the beginning, I was kind of worried, like, oh my gosh, like, is this not going to be as great as like everyone's been saying? Because I've heard the same thing is that everybody had early reviews of it or early viewings of it, had like nothing but like, the best things to say that I saw on Twitter and
mhm,
social media. And so like the first 10 minutes, I was just like, am I like seeing a different movie? Like I
mhm.
wasn't excited at the beginning, but by the time the movie ended, and I thought back to that beginning scene, I was like, that makes a lot more sense now. And I absolutely loved how they did it at the beginning. And I'll talk a little bit more about, what was really unique and what was really fun and interesting about that as well, too. But I walked away like really loving it. I know a lot of people said that this was better than the first film. Um, for me, like I feel like these are like two different kinds of stories that they told that it's hard for me to say like if one is better than the other. I think for what they
Mhm.
are, they're both, fantastic in its own right. That I don't think there's one better than the other because the first one was really like a story in and of itself. This one is part of a second movie that's going to come out later on whenever that happens, which is, Beyond the Spider-Verse. And it really sits as like the part one of two, which is how they designed it. But it's just really different in terms of the first movie was focused on Miles' origin story and him becoming Spider-Man. This one kind of takes it a step even further to go deeper as a person and his role connected to the rest of the Spider-Verse. And this is also, a Gwen Stacy story as well, too. So the first one was very much a Miles Morales one. Second one is still Miles Morales, but now it's kind of framed around the person of Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman in her
Mhm.
universe, which we call Spider-Gwen, but, in her universe, she's called Spider-Woman. So, yeah, my overall thought is I absolutely loved it. I just did a review for this for Comic Watch, and I think the score I gave it was ended up being like a 9.5 out of 10. And like there's a couple things that I think is going to be a little bit of a struggle, but like overall, I just absolutely love this film, and I thought it was the best Spider-Man movie, the best comic book movie, the best animated
Mhm.
film that we have had in cinematic history so far.
Oh my gosh. This is gonna win awards. It has to. I
Yes,
like,
yeah,
I refuse a life where this movie wins no awards for how, like, even again, like, just from, like, a filmmaking standpoint,
hmm,
it deserves it deserves all of the recognition.
yes, I agree. And the first movie won Best Animated Feature. I'm hoping that this will win that and like best film plus all the other categories that they had. Like
Mhm.
I don't know if they get too granular with the animation part in terms of the art, but like we'll talk about this a little bit later. But the
Yeah.
artwork in this one like blew me away in that the first movie animation art was fantastic. This one just like stepped it up a notch higher
Mhm.
that I didn't think was possible, but it was wonderful. So what's interesting about the movie is we're recording this right now on Friday. So officially the official day that the movie comes out, but Ellie and I both watched this Thursday night. And they've already reported that domestically across the United States, Spider-Man has already earned $17.4 million on Thursday night alone.
That's
And
amazing.
I don't doubt that at all. And I would not be surprised if it hits, the 50 million mark or higher domestically by the end of the weekend as well too, because it's a lot of people have been talking about this, a lot of people have been excited about this, and it's living up to the hype for me so far.
This is one of the most anticipated movies of this year.
Yes. Yeah.
It
Like
is. It
not
has
just
potential
animated
to be
film.
like the movie of the year. I mean, we have a lot of. I mean, like, listen, Barbie is coming out this year, so I will say Barbie is coming out this year, but it has potential to be like the movie of 2023.
Yes. And I agree. And I think not just animated films, like just like you said, like movie period. I know Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated movies is doesn't have the same level of hype, but a lot of people are excited about that.
It looks really good.
It looks really good, and the animation style is very similar to Spider-Verse. And I think that's one of the reasons why they went in that direction, is because they've been wanting to do something like that, and the fact that Spider-Verse has had such success in their art style. Like it's something that they've been wanting to do in that sort of style as well too, and they know that it's successful. So I think that one's going to be really amped up. But this one definitely just blows every movie I've seen so far out of the water, just in terms of everything about it. So with that being said, let's talk about the story itself. What did you think about the story here? Because the first movie, like I talked about, is about how Miles Morales became Spider-Man and kind of getting that confidence to be able to step up when you have that challenge presented to yourself. This one is a little bit more about Miles' character and his place within the Spider-Verse and the challenges that's actually be kind of thrown at him as well too. What did you think about the story that's being told in this movie?
I really liked it. I like that you brought up the beginning and how it was much slower pace compared to the rest of the film. And I think it was really important to have those scenes, especially with Miles, because it's very important to his character, like his relationship with his parents and how they communicate with each other, and how his parents view him and how he views his parents. And again, like that struggle of, he has this secret identity as Spider-Man, like he has this responsibility, but then of course there's like the other side as just Miles, going to school, thinking about college, like his parents asking him to do things like make sure you pick up the cake and you show to your father's party on time. Like,
right.
It's so important to kind of like focus on those like very real, grounded moments. That I like that they settled on that for Miles, because again, that paid off in the end. You saw how impactful that was. And then again, with like, even with Gwen kind of getting a bit of her origin and seeing her relationship with her father and how that got impacted when he learns that she is Spider-Woman, because he was actively chasing after Spider-Woman because he believed that it was because of her that Peter died in their universe. And it's just like seeing that bit of clash, and then again seeing what happens to their relationship later on in the story when she comes back to her universe to talk to him. And it was like those little moments that I really loved about this movie. And what I often really like about Spider-Man media is when they focus on that kind of like grounded moment where it's the hero kind of fighting that struggle between their two lives and seeing how it's impacted them and their relationship with the people in their lives.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, that's what makes all these kinds of stories, but especially Spider-Man, successful, is how the universality of the story that they're focusing on. So it's not just like I'm the good guy trying to stop the bad guy, but it's like actual challenges of you don't know how it's going to end up and what decisions they're going to make, because they're very, complex and has a lot of real consequences depending on the direction they go. What's funny about the beginning of the movie, which, as you said, and as I mentioned, it was a little slow at first, but I did like the fact that this was a movie that is very much a comic book movie. The first 10 minutes was very reminiscent of her first full issue that, we did a review on this for this show last week. But it was like the first page or two, it just pretty much says like, here's how she became Spider-Woman, basically. And it didn't even like give into a whole lot of details. It was like all these panels that's in the backdrop of Gwen playing drums. And that's exactly what we got in this movie, is as she's playing drums, you're seeing the story of how she became Spider-Woman came about. So there's a lot of great parallels with her origin story from the comics that got, introduced to this one. It's the same Earth. They're both Earth 65. But what I love about this is that, like I talked about before, it's framed, right? And that it starts off setting up on Gwen Stacy, because this is going to be a Gwen Stacy movie as well as a Miles Morales, but in two different, completely different ways. And that we get to see how she became Spider-Woman and how she gets, roped into the Spider Society. But a lot of this was pitted against her relationship with her father. And then throughout the movie, we find out that one of the things that makes a spider hero, Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, or, whatever their moniker is that they have somebody close to them die. And so Spider-Gwen knows that her father is supposed to die as part of her identity, or as part of her, character in her universe. That's meant to happen, because that's what Miguel O'Hara, who's Spider-Man 2099, says, like, when you try to mess with that, then, the Spider-Verse starts, unraveling. And so that's why he's trying to correct all these things, because of what got set in place from the first movie. But when we get to the end of the movie, she goes back to her universe, and she gets sent back there and talks to her father. And her father was supposed to die as a captain, but because she had left him and he hadn't heard from her for like 3 months, he had quit the police force and never, becomes captain, which means that gave Gwen the confidence to know that maybe there is another way, that their fates aren't sealed in this Spider-Verse, and that because now he's not going to be captain, he's not going to die, and she's still Spider-Gwen, and that maybe there's a way to do this, which leads her to create like this new Spider Society, or whatever, they're going to call themselves, to take on the Spider Society and to help Miles, by the end of the movie that we see. So I love that they kind of use it as a framing device, but to tell the story. And I love the relationship building they show between her and her father. And just as a parent, I just loved all of it, because you really see how much parents love their kids in this movie. And this was just one shining example of it. But it was phenomenal how they set it up with that. The other big piece about this movie that I love about the story is that it starts off by, like what you said, when Miles went to his high school to talk about college applications, the principal says, like, we need to know what is the story of Miles Morales, like the character and all that. And then throughout the rest of the movie, that's exactly what happens, right? Like Miles sees who he is from his mother's eyes when she gives him like the really heartfelt talk about, you're becoming a man, but I want you to protect that little boy. We see how Miguel O'Hara tells him how his life is supposed to end up, and how, first of all, he wasn't even supposed to be Spider-Man, and that he was a mistake, and that how he, is supposed to live his life out. That's already been determined, because if he doesn't, then he pretty much, destroys the whole Spider-Verse. And so he's being told from a lot of different ways, from a lot of different people. He gets to see like how he's viewed from Peter B. Parker and Gwen Stacy, because they knew about it and they didn't tell him, what was going on. And then when he gets into Earth 42 by accident, he sees his alternate version of what happened, because, there was no Spider-Man that became into existence in that universe, that he becomes the Prowler and not his uncle. So he sees all these things about, what his character, what his future, what he as a person is being told, like what he was supposed to be, and that he's going through this process of becoming his own person in spite of all these things they're telling him what he's supposed to be, right? And so I love, like, that's how they told the story in all these different ways. And I think the next movie, they're going to solidify that. We're going to see more, backstory from Miguel O'Hara. So I wonder if he's going to be like that next, character. The first movie was Peter B. Parker was the side character that you really, empathize with. This one was Spider-Gwen. My guess is Miguel O'Hara is going to be the next one, because we haven't seen what exactly he experienced. Like, they told us, but we haven't seen it and we don't know the details. So my guess is we're going to see that in the next one, and how that's going to play a part into this whole story as well. So storytelling wise, the writing was just phenomenal. And I think this was just, one example of like how that was just amazing in this movie. Let's dive into the animation, the artwork here. What did you think about the artwork?
It was so beautiful, and just,
yeah,
I was in awe of so much of the animation. And last night I was talking to my friend, especially about the Spot's design and how it evolved throughout the movie. And by the end of it, he's kind of terrifying. And I think I literally said his design was terrifyingly stunning. It was scary. Like, he was a villain. He looked like a villain by the end of it. But the design of it was so beautiful, just the way that he looked and the background imagery that they would input in it as well. I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
I would love this as like an art piece. Almost like, and there were so many moments throughout the movie where I was like, I wish I could just like screen grab this right now and
Hmm.
get like a printout, which makes me excited for all of the art that will eventually come out, either especially made by fans, because I'm
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get my hands on some prints for sure
Oh
because it
yeah.
was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And they stepped it up from the first movie.
Oh
Like, I
yeah.
thought the first movie, the animation was incredible, but then this one, they leveled up, and it makes me, I'm like, where else can they go with Beyond the Spider-Verse?
Yeah. I know. Well, and that's what I think was really I think that was something that was really impactful, and it was amazing in the first movie that the animation style was just mind-blowing because it was a
Mhm,
combination of computer graphics and
mhm.
hand-drawn animation, and that's what made it
Yep.
distinct, and it looked very much like a comic book style kind of animation. So when you're thinking about the art for this one, they definitely replicated that, but because they had the Spider-Verse, they had a lot of fun of implementing like different kinds of artwork. So Spider-Punk, that I'm going to talk a little bit more later, he had a very distinct art look that is different from the other ones because I'm assuming that's just how he was drawn in the comics. I've never read one of the Spider-Punk stories, but my guess is that's just how he was portrayed in that sort of art style. But what I absolutely love is the scenes with Gwen Stacy and her father, is that it started off with that typical comic book animation, but as they're talking to each other and as their dialogue is progressing into different kind of emotional states, the artwork changes
Mhm.
throughout that. And that was something that really, at first I was just like, I don't know why they're doing this, but by the end of it, I was like, this is like a really beautiful way of being able to communicate that, is with the things that's happening with the different art styles and the things that's happening in background and the different like looks and appearances, stuff like that. It's
Mhm.
really giving you that visual communication of what's going on. So like the moment where Gwen's father realizes that she is Spider-Woman and he has to kind of make a decision on how to proceed with this. They did like a very different, a completely different art look for him, but they had like kind of like the split, like a duotone look to him, like kind of having to decide, all right, do I take her in or do I let it go? Like having to make a decision,
Mhm.
and that reflected, the artwork reflected that little conflict that was happening. So yeah, it's like that was just one of many things of like how they did things differently. But what I loved about it is like they weren't doing it just for the fact of doing it. They were doing it because it actually helped enhance the visual communication storytelling part of the movie that they didn't get the liberty to do in the first movie. And so just like you said, I don't know how they're going to up it up, how they're going to, ramp it up in the next movie. But that was
Mhm.
just a really stunning way of being able to use different kind of art styles to tell this story that we haven't seen before. And it's just, again, best animation artwork I've seen in a movie in a long time for that reason. I
So
think the Spider-Verse
beautiful.
allows them to be able to explore that and have it make sense at the same time.
I agree, and it made, as you were saying that, it reminded me of kind of the design and the animation they did when Gwen returns to her
Hmm.
universe and she's talking with her dad, and they're like in the main kind of like living room seating area. And as they were talking to each other, they're like the background of their apartment, they didn't put a lot of detail into it. They kept it very, very simple. So it
Yeah.
was focused on the two characters. You didn't
Hmm.
have any distractions in the background. You were focused on her father and on Gwen, and just
Right.
those 2 having that conversation, and then as with the emotional depth of their conversation, you could see kinda like the colors bleeding a little bit
Hmm.
in the background as well, and I was like, "W s" it was amazing.
Yeah.
I was like, "This is such a small little change that helps drive kind of this part of the story forward with her character."
Yes. Yeah, it was really cool. It's something you don't see in a lot of movies, and so it's really cool just to see how art plays a role with all this. And just like you said, like that was one way of how they did that is being able to just kind of let all the colors, slowly disappear. And it was just, a not completely blank, but a mostly blank background template. So you focus more on the characters and what's happening in there than like anything else that's happening in the room. So I agree. All right, characters. A lot of spider people in this movie. Who was your favorite character from this movie that you absolutely loved?
I came into the movie with my deep, deep love for Peter B. Parker, and I walked out of it with a newfound love for Hobie Brown.
Me too.
It's like Hobie, 100%.
He is. I'm telling you right now, he is the breakout star. I had no interest in Spider-Punk before this movie. Like, I didn't like his costume design. I'm not like a punk rock type of person. Yeah. Like, I enjoy like punk rock songs, but like that sort of persona, I wasn't, had any interest in. But my God, this movie, first of all, it's played by, I forget his name, but
Daniel Kaluuya.
Yes.
I can never remember his last name.
Yes, who is in Black Panther as oh my gosh, I'm escaping the character's name. Well. Yeah.
From the Border Tribe.
From the Border Tribe, like Dawana or something like that. I think yeah. But anyways, yes, thank you. Yes. But yeah, like watching the movie and like the role that he had and just the personality and everything, I absolutely love this character. Like very anti-establishment.
I didn't expect it at all.
No, I don't think anyone was expecting it, and like coming out of it, I was like, that guy was so cool. Like first of all, the art style, like we talked about, was very different. So I don't know if that's, from the comic books or what, but his art style made him look, stand out a little bit, but his personality, his role in the story, like everything about him, you just absolutely love. And it's just funny how the characters talk about like how everybody loves him and like, Miles is jealous. So before you meet him, you're getting a little jealous as well too. But then when he comes on screen and like the more he's on screen, the more you love him. I was like, oh my gosh, like I love this character now. I would not be surprised.
He was so cool.
Yes, he was so cool. Like really nice and friendly to everybody, intelligent. Really like sticks it to Miguel. Like you can tell from the first beginning, like he's like part of it as like necessity, but he clearly doesn't think much of Miguel and all that. So he's already from the get-go.
They don't mesh well. They clash.
Yeah, very much so. Yes. And so no surprise that he just like leaves him and just like, all right, I'm out. Peace, but
he was like, yeah, if it wasn't obvious, I quit.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah. So I absolutely love that character. Like he's my favorite one as well too. So I'm glad. I thought that might have been your favorite character as well. And I'm sure it's going to be a lot of people's, but it was just for me, no idea that I was going to love him so much.
I know, me too. Because I'm the same. I didn't really know much about who his character was. And like one of the comics I'm reading right now, it's like the first appearance that I have seen of his character. So now I'm excited to continue reading because I'm like, okay, yeah, like give me all the Hobie content. Now I'm going to go chase after other comics he makes appearances in because I'm like, this character is so cool. I want to learn more from a comic standpoint on who his character is. And I'm like excited for Beyond the Spider-Verse because I'm like, more Hobie Brown.
Yes. I would not be surprised if in Beyond the Spider-Verse, if they didn't have him planned to be in the movie like as much as this time, like they're probably going to write him in even more because of the huge success that they're seeing with audiences with this character. And so it's just
wonder. I think because I was looking at it last night, I think they might be finished with Beyond the Spider-Verse because I was looking at it and it's slated for March of next year.
Is it really?
Yeah, it was like March 20-something, 2024. So I think they made both of the movies at the same time. Like
what they did with Infinity War and Endgame.
Exactly. Yeah, I think they did everything like at the same time. They're probably just finishing up in post right now for it. But I think I didn't see anything about it being delayed.
No, I mean, I haven't either. I hadn't had a chance to look at it. I just didn't know if they had filmed it at the same time or not. But I mean, that's also still a long time where they can go in and maybe add some scene. Like they do this all the time. They're
like, oh, Hobie's really popular. Let's just add more of them in.
Like where are some places we can like, maybe give him like a moment to shine or maybe even tell his backstory, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely love him. I will say before him, though, on the scene, Spider-Man India was
Oh my gosh.
he was a
He's
cool
so
character too.
funny.
Yeah. He's so funny. His suit and like the little, I don't know what it was called, but it looks like a yo-yo. It's not quite a yo-yo because he puts it on as a bracelet. But
Mhm.
like his take on the character is just so much fun. I absolutely love it. I know my son loved it. And he's voiced by the same guy who plays Dilpinder in the Deadpool movies.
Yeah.
Which I was like, oh, I love that. And I hope that Deadpool makes a reference about that in Deadpool 3 since he's supposed to be in that movie as well.
That would be hilarious.
I
I
would
like really I really hope he would.
but I mean that character was really cool as well. And like it was just it's nice because the Spider-Verse, even though they all have like similar origin stories, like there's a lot of cool ways to tell a story because his is very much like, yeah, he has like some similarities, but his suit is very different. His style is very different. I was just talking to somebody at my comic book shop, the one of the people that works there. He actually loved the miniseries comic book series that came out about that character, and so he doesn't know anything about him in this movie, but knows him from the comics. And he said that his story was that it's really based a lot more around like Hindu myths and things like that, or mythology. And
Mhm.
so like, I'm really excited to try to go back and read that on Marvel Unlimited, but that's a really cool character I absolutely love. So if it wasn't for Spider-Punk, he would be my favorite from the
Agreed.
movie.
I'm with you.
But it's a really cool. And again, you know, there's a reason why we really want to push for, more inclusion and more, diversity, because this was just like a cool way to tell Spider-Man in something that we haven't seen before, by somebody that doesn't look like, Peter Parker. That is just so fair. And again, like I loved it. My son loved it. Like it's really important. Like there's a reason why we want to tell these stories. And I think, there's like multiple reasons for that. And I just love that we got this, not just as like a, character in the background, but this was like one of the critical points in the movie
Mhm.
that was just a lot of fun, just really cool. And we really enjoyed just seeing that story and seeing that take of Spider-Man from that backdrop. And so it was just absolutely, absolutely awesome. Um, this movie also has cameos in it.
I lost my mind. I was very much not a calm person at the cameos.
Yeah. I like how they really contained the cameos in a specific scene. So they didn't like draw it out throughout the whole movie. It was just more of like they were telling the story about the Spider-Verse, so it makes sense to bring in these cameos during the
Mhm.
scene. So I think that was tastefully done, that it wasn't like overdone with cameos by any means whatsoever, but they gave us a lot of like great fan service on this.
Mhm.
I know you're a huge Spider-Man fan from Andrew Garfield specifically, right?
Hmm?
Yes.
Yes, I
Um,
am.
so I'm sure you loved seeing him show
I
up in
did.
this movie.
I did. I really, really did. I remember he graced the screen.
Yes.
Yes, it was him crying over Captain Stacy
Yeah.
dying.
Mhm.
But I was like, it's the way that it wasn't a cameo for the sake of a cameo. It was to
Right.
further the story. It was to show those canon events. It was to show, how Captain Stacy is going to die in
Yes.
like every universe. Like it furthered the story. So it wasn't there for the sake of being there to be like, oh my gosh, Spider-Man from all the different universes. No, it had a specific purpose,
Mhm.
which I adored. And I was like, and the same thing when they like showed that like the brief clip with like Toby, uh,
Yeah.
like holding Uncle Ben.
Mhm.
It had a specific purpose. It wasn't there just to be like, here's Toby Maguire as Spider-Man. It had
Mhm.
a purpose.
Right. Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense why Sony released that image of like all the other Spider-Man films, is
Hmm.
because it's showing it how they're all part of that larger
Hmm.
Spider-Verse cinematic universe, or whatever they call
Miguel
it.
even brought up Tom,
Yes. Which
which
as someone who is not a fan of Doctor Strange,
I knew you loved that.
I love
I
the riff on
knew
it.
you
Yeah.
loved the Doctor Strange slander.
It was well, and it was great, like because we heard that in the trailer, but for Spider-Gwen be like, he doesn't sound like much of a doctor you want to hang around with. I was like, yes.
You're like, this is for me.
Yes, no, I know. I was like, they knew it somehow, and I am all for it. But yeah, so it was really cool. I think it was tastefully done on how they did it, because like you said, it's not like they shot a cameo shot for them just to show up in it. It's they brought out a scene from the previous movie to show like they're connected to this universe as well. They brought in, I forget her name, but from Venom, this has been talked about how
It was like Mrs. Chen, I think.
yes, yeah, something like that. But she showed up in there. For me, one things that I was absolutely happy with in terms of a cameo is how they brought in Donald Glover as not just Uncle Aaron, but as the Prowler. Because especially Donald Glover, because Donald Glover, I can't remember if he was the reason why he was the inspiration for Miles Morales.
He is.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if that was the case or if it was like inspiration for like the movie or something like that. But he was the inspiration for that. Like the Brian Michael Bendis, I think, has been on record saying that he saw Donald Glover in the Spider-Man costume and that's what gave him the idea, something like that. And to see him in Spider-Man Homecoming and then not see him as the Prowler or see Miles, in the MCU yet, this was a really nice touch to kind of, allude to that and kind of give people like, hey, he's the Prowler in one of these universes. They didn't really confirm which one it is. They didn't confirm it was the MCU or not. But the fact that there is a Donald Glover, Aaron Davis as Prowler out there in the Spider-Verse was a nice touch. I remember being really excited to see that on screen. I was not expecting that at all. So I just absolutely love seeing that. And again, going back to the movie theater experience of being able to see something for the first time without having it spoiled, I absolutely love that. That was a complete surprise for me that I didn't know it's something that was going to happen going in. And it was just like a thrilling experience. So that was definitely my favorite cameo of the whole movie.
I can't even lie. I think my soul left my body for like half a second when I saw Donald Glover because I wasn't expecting it. And I was like, wait, it took me like my soul left my body for like half a second. And then it took me a second to process. I was like, that's Donald Glover.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, like he's on the screen right now.
And I love the interaction. And I love the interaction he had with Miles, how he's just like, it's rude to stare at people like this, It was
honestly, his energy was giving a little bit of like the MCU kind of version that we did see of him in Homecoming.
A little bit, yeah.
My hope is that it is him, but then obviously my mind starts turning and I'm like, what happened for him to like end up in this situation? And then my mind just starts going and then I'm going to like end up in a deep spiral if I think too deep into it, but I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, and with Sony announcing that there's a live Miles Morales movie in the works and that we know there's a Spider-Man 4 in the MCU coming out, I'm wondering if this is a nod for them to say that he's going to show up in one of these movies, as the Prowler. I think that'd be cool if they did that. It shows that, the long-term planning they've been doing with some of these things. I would love to see him in a movie sometime, whether it's animated or live action as the Prowler. Cause I think Donald Glover is a fantastic actor. He does some amazing things outside of acting as well too. I just love him in anything that he does, and I think he'll be spectacular with continuing that role in the Spider-Verse, whatever shape or form it comes in. A couple of things I want to talk about before we wrap things up here is the first movie was really well known for a lot of different things, one of them being the spectacular music that it had. Like it had Sunflower in there, What's Up Danger, like those are like some major songs that's been associated with the movie that when you listen to it, you can't, help but think about that movie. I don't think this movie had like any songs that really stand out in that same way. I think that's probably one of the downside of this movie is that it's not going to have a very popular soundtrack. And I can't even remember, I'm going to see it later. Like, like I'm going to see the movie. So I'm going to kind of keep an ear out for this a little bit more, but I just can't remember what song they played that was really catchy or really stood out for me. Do you?
It didn't. I need to rewatch it. I don't, my mind was like not focused on the music at all
with
this time around, but I don't think it really had any kind of like those really stand out. I have been looking at the soundtrack. I'm going to listen to it later today. I mean, the artists that are part of it are very talented and they put out a lot of good music. So I have faith that the music is incredible, but it's like, as of now, I'm like, I think Into the Spider-Verse probably has my favorite soundtrack.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like now that it's different with this movie because it was more story driven.
Right.
Where in the first one, the music did kind of like elevate the scenes.
Right.
But I mean, maybe in this movie it did it too, but I was just probably not paying attention.
I
I
know.
probably
Well,
wasn't just paying as much attention to it.
yeah, and the movie just came out yesterday. And so for those of you who are watching and listening, we're recording this on on the Friday, like the day after it officially came out in the United States, um, Canada as well, I believe, right? Or did it come out Wednesday in Canada?
Thursday,
Was it
like
Thursday?
was the
Okay,
advanced screening, but then there were some theaters doing like early screenings on Wednesday, just like
gotcha.
a handful.
Yeah. So to be fair, like in terms of music, I can't remember when I watched Into the Spider-Verse, like how long it took between watching it and then getting into the songs too, right? So it might be one of those things where like there were songs in it and you just weren't paying attention to it, but like, maybe second or third time you're watching it and you're just like, oh, that song. And then that becomes a insanely popular song as well, too. So as of right now, like it doesn't hold up for us, but who knows, like after time has passed, like maybe the songs end up being more of a, part of the popular, general consciousness of the story. But it just seemed like that was like one of the things that didn't do as well with the first
Mhm.
movie is the song choice. The score was really good, and both of them, the score was fantastic. But in terms of like soundtrack with music, especially with Miles being an artist, it didn't seem like they have a whole lot of songs that really stood out the same way that Into the Spider-Verse did. Um, the thing that I think this movie has a challenge with is that it's another multiverse movie. And I say that this is a challenge, not necessarily it's a negative thing, because they did the multiverse thing, first before we had like Spider-Man, No Way Home, or DC kind of had a multiverse, but it was more of like a hinting at it, wasn't about the multiverse. So this film, Into the Spider-Verse, was a fully multiverse movie. So it was kind of like the first one to really do it. But now that we have the multiverse in the MCU, we're doing the multiverse in the DC movies and things like that.
Mhm.
Everyone, I think, is feeling like all the superhero movies now, all they're about is multiverse. And I think it's more of an unfortunate thing. And I think that that's one of the struggles that this movie is going to have is how it's going to break out from the other movies in a multiversal story. But I will say this is that as I watch it, I think it's just more of the multiverse as a backdrop. It's not the focus of it, right? So
Mhm.
Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness it's all about the multiverse. It like
Yeah.
just did a bunch of cameos. It just went from world to world and stuff like that. This one is more of like there are multiverses, but it's more of the background, the setting of the scene rather than the focus of the story.
Yeah.
So I think that's how it's going to be successful. But I think it is going to be a challenge for them of trying to get across to audiences like how, this is a great story that just happens to be in the multiverse and not about the multiverse. But it's definitely just an unfortunate situation to be in that all the other superhero universes are also about the multiverse as well.
I think it's with the whole multiverse thing. It brings me to one of the things that was talking about with my friend last night that I've been like deeply thinking about, and is those canon events.
Yeah.
And you learn like across the multiverse, there are those specific events that are meant to happen and that will always happen.
Mm.
And you see that kind of battle with Miles and how he's able to process that because now he learns within his universe, within his world, that canon event is his father dying,
Hmm.
as he's promoted to Captain Morales.
Yes.
And he's doesn't want that to happen. Now
Right.
he's going to actively fight to make sure his father doesn't die. But that, of
Hmm.
course, goes against what Miguel is trying to avoid because he says, if you saw this happen.
Hmm.
Um, we've seen this happen before. Like you see what's going to happen if you stop a canon event from happening.
Right.
It's going to collapse on itself. It's like the entire Spider-Verse
Hmm.
is at risk and is at stake. And it's so interesting to see
Hmm.
because I was talking with a friend and I was like, you know what? Sometimes canon things across media, sometimes it's BS. Like sometimes it sucks.
Yeah.
The canon thing is so something you don't want to happen. And
Yeah.
it sucks that it's like, oh, well, it has to happen because here's this thing at risk. Well, that doesn't mean he's not going to do anything in his power to make sure
Hmm.
he can save his father, but also make sure, the entire Spider-Verse doesn't crumble on itself.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think what's really interesting that they probably going to explore more of this and beyond the Spider-Verse is that you have two kind of paradoxes that's happening here, right?
Mhm.
Is that these canon events has to happen, otherwise they'll unravel. But Miguel's saying that Miles in Earth 1610 wasn't even supposed to be Spider-Man to begin with because
Which
that
was
spider came
interesting to
from a
learn.
different, yeah, it's from a different universe. Which the comic that I read that had the first appearance of Miles like didn't really explore that and didn't even seem to insinuate, um, didn't even really seem to insinuate that that was the case that the spider came from a different universe. So I don't know if
Mhm.
that's something from the comics later on or what, but that was a different kind of a twist of events of how that spider was from, universe 42. But I think what's interesting is that the fact that he wasn't even supposed to be Spider-Man to begin with, does that mean that those canon events has to happen for him the same way that happens for everybody else? And we start to see that Miguel's so worried about the Spider-Verse starts to unravel that with this sort of thing happening with Miles, and then what we see with Spider-Gwen, and that her father now is not going to be a captain, which means that he may not die, which again, like she didn't stop it. Technically they did with the Spider Society and stuff like that. Like you can point it back to Miles and all that, or go point it back to, Spot, because really he was the one that brought it in, right? And so it just depends on how far back you go. But the fact that all these things start to unravel, I think, is going to kind of talk about how canon is, not something that's always set in stone. I think that's part of the theme that they're setting up here for the next movie is that,
Mhm.
what's fate and what's in your control and like what happens if you try to, take control of your destiny here. And we see that kind of unravel. But the fact that, you have Miguel saying that these canon events have to stay in place and that Miles wasn't even supposed to be Spider-Man to begin with, does that mean that he still has to follow those canon events because of that? So I think it's going to be a really interesting thing we're going to explore. And I think we're going to dive more into that in the third movie that's coming out.
It's such a good question though, because
Mhm.
I was absolutely wondering that too. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, was it still going to be a fixed point? It was just going to affect that Peter's story.
Hmm.
If with Captain Morales dying, was that going to impact his story? Like, was that what the original path was? Was that
Right.
always going to be a fixed point? But then, with Peter dying in 1610,
Yeah. And he
is
wasn't
that like
supposed to
another
die,
weird
according
like
to
ripple
Miguel.
effect? Like, was
Yeah.
that meant to happen? Was that not supposed to happen? It's like all of like these questions like start coming up. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for Miles's universe?
Hmm.
Like, what could happen? Does that mean it's going to like fold in on itself?
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
Yeah. And so I think that's exactly what they're going to explore in that third movie. And it'll be really interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of conversations about it. I think some people will be happy with how they explore it. I think some people are not going to be happy with it because, theories and how people are really fixated on, these things that are fictional, like as much as I love it, at the end of the day, it's fictional. So whatever they, do is whatever they do. But,
And I'm going to be
um,
seated for it. I don't care.
yeah,
Like,
I know. Like I'm going to be, honestly, I will be. They've been doing such a great job so far that I have faith in Sony in this project. I don't
oh
have
yeah,
faith in them and the other
their
Spider
live action. I'm
villains.
so sorry. It's
Yes, I
bad.
know. I know. It's just I did have a little glimmer of hope of Madam Web because that sounds like that might actually be okay. The fact that they're doing live action Miles Morales, I hope they do a good job at that. But
Right.
again, they
I'm
haven't
kind of
really.
scared for Craven, but I'm still gonna watch it.
I know, like we're
I'm
all
like
gonna watch it
worried.
because we're all like at least interested, But like they just haven't had a whole lot of success in doing these villains. So hopefully, if they go back to doing live action heroes like Miles Morales and Spider Gwen and all that, I think that might find some more success in that.
I think the hope is maybe they like learn from their mistake with the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yes.
That's my hope is that they've kind of learned their mistake there. Or maybe just maybe Marvel will have more of a role in the production
Right.
of the movies. That would be my hope is maybe they'll work in like more of a partnership to
Yes.
get them out there rather than kind of Sony working more independently.
Especially if they do as part of the MCU and not like shoehorn like what they did with Morbius and all that, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't
Like
know.
kind of
I
force
still
them.
haven't watched it all and I don't plan on it.
It's okay. Like I mean, it's not great. Like there's some things that was like kind of cool, but then like majority of the movie, I'm like, it's not that thrilling. But they kind of shoehorn themselves in with like Morbius and Venom 2. And I don't know if that's been intentional with Marvel Studios or that's like Sony, like kind of, putting that out there and be like, oh, cat's out of the bag. I guess you kind of have to make sure that this is part of the MCU now.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it just did seem kind of out of left field. So I'm hoping that if they do these things, it will be done with justice and everything. But yeah, so, with this movie, so now it ended with, Spider-Gwen getting her own like group of spider heroes with the original people from the Into the Spider-Verse. So we saw Spider-Man Noir in there. We did see Penny earlier in the movie, and so she's part of the team now. Spider-Ham. I thought Spider-Ham may have like been in there for a glance of a second.
I don't recall seeing him, but I'm sure he was just in the background somewhere.
Yeah, like he wasn't really prominent. I don't think it was even speaking because I don't think John Mulaney was credited with this, and so I don't think he even spoke in the movie. I think it was just more of like a split second you saw him in the background in the Spider Society or something like that. But you got all those characters plus Hobie. And and I think
so happy.
I can't remember if Spider Bite was part of that team, so I think that's going to be really cool.
I'm pretty sure she was.
I love Spider Bite's character. I think that was really cool character that they included in there. And it's kind of left with like Jessica Drew kind of wondering what side she's going to take because you can tell that she's on board with Miguel, but at the same time, she's like always questioning all this because he's seeing what's happening over here as well too. So it'll be interesting.
One interesting thing that I saw, someone on TikTok made a video about it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even notice." And I think it's the main poster for the movie,
right?
Where you have like Miles at the front, and you have all of the spider people like in the background, and then I think it's like on his left you have like Miguel, and like then Riley, and you have Jessica Drew, and then on his right you have Gwen, you have Peter, you have like Hobie, and then you see the two sides. You see the Spider Society, and then you have Gwen's team.
Yeah,
and like I guess her team of resistors.
Yeah, whatever they call
whatever
themselves.
You want to call them. It's like a slight tease in that poster. Of the two clashing sides. And I was like, that's so cool. I was like, that had to have been intentional to have those like two teams on either side of him.
It must be a lot of fun to be the poster maker for these movies because you have a lot of opportunities to, tell a story with just this one poster and like things like that, like with the details, like it's just phenomenal. But now that you say that, it's like, oh, I think I remember seeing that. And you're totally right. It's, I think they're kind of split between those sides. So it'll be interesting to go back and kind of look at that and see like, how many like end up on that side versus the other side. So
see if that's going to be like any tell of how the future of the films are going to go. If, that team, like the resistance is going to continue to grow or not.
Agreed. So, all right. So those are all the things I wanted to hit. Last minute thoughts. Anything else you want to add on about the movie that you want to talk about or share with or anything? If you don't, that's totally okay. Cause I know we talked a lot, but
I feel like it's like one of those things I think I've said what I needed to say for now, but on second watch, I feel like I'm going to have so much more to say, but I'm like, for my initial thoughts, I think I've said what I've needed to say.
Yeah. Agreed. Overall, out of 10, what would you rate this at?
Like 9.5, 10.
That's what I rated it for as Comic Watch too. Yeah. That's so funny. Like I said, I think there's just very, very small things, but they're small things. They didn't take away from the story. Like it was phenomenal. It's definitely just hands down. Like didn't know how they were going to, ramp it up better than the first one, and somehow they did. I would be hesitant to say that it's better than the first one. I think they're just two very different stories, but there are things they ramped up in this one that I didn't know how they were going to do that with how well the first one was. And so it was just phenomenal in how they did that. So I completely agree. So, all right. So before we wrap up this episode, just want to let people know that Comic Watch is always looking for reviewers. So if you want to be a reviewer for comic books, TV shows, movies, anything like that, we're always looking for reviewers. So going to be a link in the show notes below for you to be able to apply, and then somebody will get back in touch with you within a week. But it's a really great community to be part of. I absolutely love being part of Comic Watch. The community is phenomenal. We're really supportive of each other. So if anything, we definitely want reviewers, but it's definitely a great group of people to be a part with. And then next week's episode, we're going to be celebrating Superman Day, which is June 12th. So joining the show is former co-host Kevin Stoliker, and we're going to do a review of one of his favorite comic book stories, Superman Birthright. So make sure you stay in tune with that for next week. So we end every episode by talking about the comics we're currently reading. As I mentioned, usually we record episodes on Sunday night, but because of this movie and some other scheduling things, we're recording this Friday. And so I didn't get a chance to ask people what their favorite comics or what comics they're reading. So it's just going to be Ellie and I sharing what we're reading. So Ellie, I'm going to start with you first. What comics are you reading currently?
I'm only reading like two things right now, which is shocking for me, honestly. But I'm reading Spider-Geddon right now, and which is the first time I've like experienced Hobie. So now I'm like excited to actually finish it because I want to see how much of his character is in it now. So I'm in the middle of Spider-Geddon, and then I am on like issue 6, I think, of Captain America: Sentinel of Liberty.
Oh, how's that going?
I really like it. I started reading it a while ago, but then I started reading the Secret Empire event, and then I just kept getting confused because they're two wildly different stories. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put Sentinel of Liberty on hold as I gather more issues, and then I can just like read it all in one go.
Yeah. I've heard people who've been reading Sentinel of Liberty that they've really enjoyed that series. And so
it's really good. I love it. And so the covers are stunning. I'm very obsessed with the covers.
Yeah. I think I've seen some of the covers as well too, and they're really well done. So
the variant covers are really, really nice.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you want to read Captain America series, the current one, Sentinel of Liberty, has been, really, a lot of people have been raving about that. So, all right. No, those are really cool series. I don't think I've read the Spider-Geddon one yet. Is this the one that's like currently, or is this one that came out like a few years ago?
I think this is from like, I want to say 2018, but I could be wrong.
Okay, gotcha.
And I think it's leading up to some big Spider-Verse event.
Right.
That's why I'm like reading it first so I can read the other one. It's thick.
Yeah.
It's a big one. But I think it's like a precursor to some big massive Spider-Verse event. There's a lot of spider people in it, which makes me so excited because I'm like, spider people, my favorite.
Yeah. I just finished up I think the Edge of Spider-Verse or something like that, where they had a lot of different spider people in there as well. And they introduced a new one called Spider-Boy, and I forget his name, but he's like completely new to the Spider-Verse. So that's a brand new character we got this year. But what's interesting is that there's a lot of Spider-Verse stories with the same kind of titles that came out in different years. So Edge of Spider-Verse was also the name of a series back in 2014, where that's where we got Spider-Gwen from, was the Edge of Spider-Verse series. So, and that was just 2014. So it's like less than 10 years later, we have another Edge of Spider-Verse event that's happening.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to kind of see that.
I love any type of Spider-Verse story. It's so much fun to see them interacting with each other. Yeah,
they're really fun. One spider character I really want to try to read someday, in addition to, Spider-Man India and Spider-Punk now, is Silk, because I've heard great things about it. I haven't read any of her comics, but she seems like a really interesting character, and I really want to read her story. So that is one character that I'm hoping to read pretty soon, is Silk from the Spider-Verse. The comics that I am picking up on my poll list this week is Batman number 136, which is written by Chip Zdarsky, as well as Daredevil number 12. Daredevil is going to be ending pretty soon. It's not this issue, but I think it's going to be the next issue or issue number 14. I can't remember which one that is. Dark Knights of Steel number 11, which this has been something that's been in the works for like a couple of years. They went on hiatus for a while, but number 11 comes out this week, and it's supposed to be ending on number 12. Absolutely love the story. It's written by Tom Taylor, and the story is it's kind of, I don't know if it's like a different universe or not, but it's pretty much all the DC superheroes that they have if they were, somehow living in like the medieval times. Yes. And it's like different stories of characters, different power sets, stuff like that. So it's just a lot of fun to be able to, it's kind of like a what if, but not a what if necessarily. It's just more of like it's like a what if type of thing, where you kind
You're
of,
like, okay, let's be honest.
yeah, I mean, it is in the sense that, you're switching things up at the same time. It's not like how Marvel does it, where it's like, what if this little thing changed or whatnot, so it's just more like, what if we just took this story and it's not canon, but we, decided to do a lot of different changes with it. So I'm looking forward to that one. Hell to Pay #5 is a really good one. It's from Charles Soule. And it's one that it's not from the big two, and it's not a superhero story, but it's a lot of fun. It's a really good comic that they made. Immortal X-Men #12. Again, I love X-Men. I can't remember what happened in #11, so I'm probably going to have to like do a synopsis before I read this one. And then the last one I'm picking up this week, which has been one of my favorite series of the year so far, is The Joker, The Man Who Stopped Laughing #9. I was never somebody that liked The Joker as its own solo series. I was asked to review #1 for Comic Watch, and I absolutely loved it after I read it. And so I've been picking up on my pull list, and it's just a fantastic story. It's pretty much a tale of like, there's these two Jokers out there, and no one knows like which one's the right one or which one's the real one in a sense. And it's a really fun story. It's definitely a Joker kind of story where there's, mass chaos and, maniacal schemes and things like that, but it's just a really interesting one to talk about and to read. So
I'm intrigued.
You should check it out. Definitely check it out.
I have so many things that I need to read. I'm like, do I really want to add another one? I'm just consistently purchasing more and more, and I keep looking at my shelf and I'm like, I still need to read so many of these. They're just like looking pretty on my shelf right now.
I know. I totally get that. So well, those are the comics we're reading, and this is the end of the episode. We'll review Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Ellie, thank you so much for coming on the show. Before I let you go, where can people find you and your podcast online?
If you want to listen to the podcast, I am primarily on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts as well. But if you want like other fun stuff, you can come check me out on my other social media. I'm basically everywhere. It's some variation of All Day Show. Unfortunately, the one simple username was taken in some places. So,
that happens,
but if you want to listen to the podcast, Spotify is a very popular spot to listen. So check it out.
And I'll make sure to put links to your show, as well as I think you have a link tree or something like that. I'll put that in the show notes as well too. So, well, thanks again for joining the show. Love the movie. I'm glad you loved it as well too. And I can't wait to talk more movies, especially Spider-Verse, with you in the future.
Me too. I'm so excited.
And that wraps up another episode of The Caption Life. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can follow us on social media at Caption Life. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, visit thecaptionlife.com.